Seeing as how most of the fishing that we do here in the Midwest is for warm water species, I'm always on the lookout for a new pattern for either panfish or smallmouth or something just fun to tie and something fun to fish. Well, a number of years ago, Fly Tyer magazine back in 2001 had a article on a little fly called It's a Bug. So immediately I glommed onto this and started tying some of these up for the local panfish around here. And it is a fantastic little fly for pond fishing and for stream fishing. It's quick and easy to tie. For a number of years, I taught a beginning fly tying class here at a local shop, and I actually included It's a Bug as one of the flies to tie. The reason being is, again, we're in warm water country here. There was no point in having a beginning class that focused on trout flies, so rather than that, I focused on flies that were going to work for bass and for panfish around here. The other thing is, a lot of people when they're first learning to tie flies are looking for easier patterns. Believe it or not, even a hare's ear nymph or something like that can seem a little complicated to them. This pattern is just a little chenille, which most people are introduced to with a woolly bugger, and some foam. I actually modified it so that you could make a really nice smallmouth fly by tying it on a larger hook, Mustad 3366 hook, and then adding in some rubber legs on the back of it. And this is the fly that I would tie in the beginning fly tying class. Part of it was because it was an easy pattern, but I also wanted to show people that the closed-celled foam, the 2mm foam, is a fantastic tying material, and there's all kinds of fun things you can do. So beginning tyers could tie up a topwater smallmouth or a largemouth fly in no time and have a bunch of these tied and be out on the water having fun fairly quick. Again, the smallmouth version is tied just like the regular panfish version, except on a Mustad 3366 hook. This is a number 4 hook, and I put in 5 to 6 rubber legs on the back of it prior to actually tying on the foam on the back and the rest of the fly, but otherwise it's tied just like the panfish version. So that's the It's a Bug, and this is the panfish version. I'm going to show you how to tie this. Like I said, you can modify this on a larger hook, put some legs on it, put some marabou behind it, a hackle if you want. I've had some people even palmer a hackle along the body, kind of like a woolly bugger, as opposed to the rubber legs, and it has worked very well for them. So that's the It's a Bug, and I'll get started tying. We'll begin tying the It's a Bug, placing our hook in the vise. This is a Mustad 3906B in a size 10. You can tie this fly on generally a size 12 on up to a 6 or a 4 if you want. I'm going to go ahead and debarb the hook. And then I'm going to attach my thread. I am using just a flat waxed nylon thread. You want to use a large diameter thread because a small diameter thread has a tendency to cut through the foam as we're tying this onto the hook shank. Advance my thread down to the point of the hook, trim away the tag, and then I'm going to keep going down the hook shank just a few turns, giving me a nice base layer of thread. I'll bring my thread back up to about halfway up the hook shank. Now the foam is just a 2mm foam that we're using. I like to cut these in a number of strips because usually I'm tying up a few dozen of these flies. I use a paper cutter or craft paper cutter, like a Fisker's paper cutter, and I can get the pieces and strips of foam a nice consistent width. You want to make them both the black and the colored foam the same width as the gap of the hook. Then I cut these into, for a size 10, into 1-inch lengths. It's enough to tie in and make the fly and just have just a little bit to trim off. That way I'm conserving my foam just a little bit. So I'm going to go ahead at this stage and tie in the black foam. I'm going to set it up on the hook shank so that the end of the foam is right over the thread. I'm going to push down and kind of pinch it around the hook. This just helps to assist it a little bit in tying it in. And I'm going to start wrapping my thread around the foam. Notice that the thread wraps aren't real tight. I'm not pulling down on this real hard to tie it onto the hook shank because I can easily cut through that foam. And now I'm going to wrap back up, and you'll notice that some of my loose thread wraps are sticking out a little bit here as that foam is slowly being compressed onto the hook shank. Again, you want to kind of go back and forth with your thread wraps, slowly compressing that foam down to the hook shank. Otherwise, you can easily cut through that foam, even with a large diameter thread such as this. So once you get that onto the hook shank, it's secure enough on the hook shank that when you're fishing it, the fly won't twist on you or move, but you can still actually kind of twist that foam a little bit on the hook shank while you're tying it. So if you're tying something in and doing something and it gets kind of pulled to the side a little bit, you can actually still manipulate that foam a little bit here. At this stage, we're going to tie in our chenille, and I'm just using a fine rayon chenille. You could use a nylon chenille if you want. You can actually even dub the body of this if you'd rather, but the chenille does a pretty nice job. And I'm going to attach that right at the end of the shank and advance my thread up to about a half an eye length or so behind the eye of the hook. You don't want to be right up against the eye of the hook. As you'll see when we are tying this, I don't want to end up crowding over the eye with the foam. I have a piece of Chartreuse foam here. Again, I will cut a piece off that is 1 inch long, and I'm going to tie that in. The end of the foam is going to go to the halfway point on the hook shank and meet up with the black foam. Fold that also over the hook shank. Put a couple wraps in and tighten that down a little bit, and then start wrapping down the foam down the hook shank. Generally that will pull over a little bit, so you'll have to scooch that back up. I'm going to secure that foam in. You don't have to have enough thread wraps on this that it covers all the foam up, because the chenille will cover up any color there. But I do like to put some thread wraps on here to try and smooth out and even up the whole body. Now I have my thread right in the middle of the hook shank, and this is where I'm going to tie in the rubber legs. I'm using a white rubber leg for these. This is a medium round rubber leg in a white color. You could use black or other colors if you want to. Yellow would be a good color. And I've already cut this strip into 2 inches. This again just helps. I don't have to trim the legs later. I'm going to separate 4 legs from the whole strip, and I want to leave these all together as much as I can. So at this stage I'm going to peel 2 of them from the rest. Then I'm going to put them back together, and I'm going to place the midpoint of those right over my thread wraps. And I'm going to tie these in. I'm just going to put a loose wrap to collect those, and then start to pull down a little bit and put in 4 or 5 wraps to secure those. The reason why I didn't separate all of these legs at this stage is it's going to be much easier for me to wrap the chenille around and navigate around these legs than having 8 individual legs all wiggling around all over the place. So I'm going to collect the front and back of those 2 sets of legs and pull those out to the side of the hook like this. We want those to be just right on the outside. Pull my thread tight, put another tight wrap around there to secure those, and fold the front legs back and advance my thread to just up to the foam. Be careful not to put an extra wrap on that foam, because if you do, you're going to be wrapping too close to the eye of the hook, and you can actually get this foam to start to cover up the eye of the hook, which is going to make it difficult to tie that onto your tippet when you're out fishing it. At this stage, I'm going to palmer the chenille forward, and I just wrap that right around the hook shank in touching turns. I usually get 3 wraps behind the rubber legs. You want to be careful when you're wrapping these in behind the rubber legs and in front that you're not wrapping too tight against those rubber legs. If you're real tight against the rubber legs, you can push the rubber legs to the point where they're just coming out perpendicular or even forward. You want to keep the rubber legs coming out at an angle. So make certain when you're tying this in that you are staying behind the rubber legs enough that you're covering the hook shank up, but you're not pushing those legs forward. I'll then get 1 wrap right across the middle. See how we're covering up the whole hook shank, and the legs start to look like they're just coming right out of the body of the bug. And then I'm going to get a wrap in front of the hook shank, and again, in front of the rubber legs on the hook shank. Again, make certain you're not too tight up against those legs and pushing those legs out perpendicular or backwards. You want to actually wrap that in so it's just a little forward of those rubber legs, and those rubber legs still come out and splay out at an angle. I usually only get about 2 wraps of chenille, maybe 3 in front of the rubber legs. Careful not to crowd over the chartreuse foam. Tie those in, and we can trim away the excess chenille. Again, you can dub the body on these if you would rather. So I haven't wrapped too tight against the eye there. That looks good. I'm going to fold the black foam over. I do want to pull on it just a little bit. I don't really want to stress it back here, maybe tear it, but I don't want to have, a bump and a gap there. I want this to cover the back really nice. Fold my rubber legs out of the way. I'm going to get 2 wraps around the black foam and pull that in and cinch that in, secure it with a couple more wraps. Scooch that foam back up. There we go. So it's right, everything's right up on top, like that. I'm going to trim this piece of the black foam, leaving about 1/8 of an inch from where I tied that in. Now I'm going to take my chartreuse foam here, and I'm going to fold it back over the black foam to make the head and the little wing on the back. I don't want to pull this tight back this way, fold it down and try and tie it in, because what I'm doing is I'm just folding back what will be the head of the fly. What I want to do is I want to wrap the foam over that tag. As you can see, those rubber legs are something to manage. So the foam actually just comes right up and goes right over the black. And again, where my thread is, I'm just going to put 2 wraps around there, cinch that down, and then put a couple more wraps to secure it. Don't put too many thread wraps. This is still a big thread, and as I mentioned before, you don't want to go crowding up on that eye. See, I can very easily get my tippet in there and tie that in. If I'm not careful and I tie that too far forward, I sandwich all of this around the eye of the hook. My chartreuse chartreuse foam, I'm going to cut that so that it extends just about halfway down the back of the body. And as you can see, pre-cutting that to 1 inch leaves me almost the right size. Once I've cut that, I'm going to put in a 4-turn whip finish right where the thread is hanging. And now I'm done with the thread, I can trim it away. As I mentioned before, the rubber legs, I kept those together so that wrapping the chenille and dealing with the foam and the head and everything was much easier with just a few legs to kind of move out of the way. If I had all of these sticking out, it's just more to deal with. But now we need to separate all of those. Some of these are already started to separate, so you could actually just peel those out like that. You can pop the ends of them and it will split those up. And then you can peel those out if you want. But if these are tied in and secured real well to the hook shank, you can actually stretch the whole leg and just pop that whole leg and they'll separate on you. So it's pretty quick work to get all those separated. Now, as I mentioned, the round rubber legs that I tied in were pre-cut to 2 inches. It gives me the right length. I like to have them kind of long and wiggly. It looks like a spider on the water, a beetle or something like that that fell in the water. If you want them a little shorter, you can shorten them up a little bit. But that pretty much is It's a Bug. As I said, it's a quick, easy fly to tie. There's really not much to it. You could dress this up a little bit with some foam, say that has some patterns imprinted on it, or put some dots on it if you want. You can change up some of the colors. I kind of like the contrast of the black with a brighter head on it, say a yellow or even an orange head works very, very well. Thank you for joining me today. I hope you enjoyed this video and not only learned a new pattern, but maybe learned some new techniques and a few new skills. If you like this video, please hit that thumbs up button below. You can support Dressed Irons by hitting the subscribe button, and don't forget to hit the bell icon so you get notified when new videos are published. If you have any questions or comments, feel free to leave them in the comment section and I'll be happy to answer any questions you might have. Until next time, remember, it's fly tying. If you're not having fun, you're doing it wrong.